All right, we're live. Revolutionary greetings, folks. This is Victor Coronado alongside Nick Ayala, alongside Comrade Carlos Cruz Mosquera. Comrades, how we doing?
Oh, good, comrade.
All good.
Good. This is episode 8, Nuestra America, weekly news roundup of things that are happening in Latin America. This is ANTICONQUISTA. Please check us out at anticonquista.com. Please like, please share, please subscribe. Please check us out on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter. We're on all social media platforms. We're going to start off with, obviously we promote this a certain type of way. Today we're going to start there. There's a reason why we're titling this one "The White Left in Latin America: Solidarity or Opportunism." And so, just behind the scenes, if you will, we always have these type of conversations, and we thought it was important to not keep it always behind the scenes and move this conversation into a public space. Can you guys hear me okay? Yeah, okay. There was a weird echo there on my end. All right, so we did come up with different bullet points and ideas as subtext, if you will. Let's kick it over to you, brothers, real quick. Patreon and GoFundMe opportunism. I mean, we could start there, or we could start with any other talking points that we came up with.
Well, Victor, do you want to put set up the context and background first, or you want to just get right into it?
I'll say we get right into it. But did you want me to be more specific? What did you want me to?
Well, because I'm thinking a lot of this is gonna have to be do with what happened in Haiti recently, right?
So we're gonna transition into that. Clearly, all right. So unless you're living under a rock.
I think it's because it was triggered. I think this discussion, even though we've been having this discussion for a while now, the recent discussion was triggered by what's happening in Haiti right now with the earthquake. And we're going to kind of go into, what happened with the earthquake, particularly a bit later. But right now, we want to talk about as Victor was saying, like the opportunism of the white left when it comes to collecting money for Latin America and the Caribbean. We have seen for the particular case of Haiti, the white left or people within the white left creating GoFundMes without permission from the Haitians, without consulting the Haitians, leading it themselves in their name, connected to their own individual bank accounts, which is problematic. How do we hold people accountable for that, for the money being raised? Because we are all interested in helping Haiti as leftists, because we know the situation in Haiti. We know that it's neglected. We know that it's an island that's being battered from all corners, from the imperialists, as well as when it comes to natural disasters and stuff. So people collect thousands of dollars or pounds, euros, whatever, supposedly to send to Haiti. But if it's created by an individual, how do we hold them accountable? It's something that we see all the time, not just with Haiti, but with shit that happens in Latin America. We saw it recently with the protests in Colombia. Luckily we, Red Condor, our sister organization, quickly jumped in there and we made our own GoFundMe as an organization. And we have very particular ways of doing things when it comes to that money, particular ways of being accountable, particular ways of being transparent with what we do with that money, making sure that we show people that there's no way that money is going to be spent anywhere else apart from where we say is going to be spent. And it's just something that doesn't happen with other individuals, and also organizations that are part of the white left. And that's just part of the problem. That's just one, particular way that the white left kind of leeches off our people's struggle. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I would add to that, there's it's the opportunism of individuals, and even not just individuals. Sometimes they their like whole organizations or their NGOs. But we have to keep in mind, you know, specifically like we said, this conversation started from Haiti. So let's keep in mind the history of Haiti, the history of what happened after the 2010 earthquake, how the amount of NGOs, individuals, the amount of people who, you know, collected money from over 300,000 people dying. Literally, this is straight up off the backs of hundreds of thousands of deaths. And it's looking like this one is going to be the same thing. Thousands of people dead, and people are going to be making money off of it. Whilst also at the same time knowing that there are Haitian organizations that exist that are actually legitimate and are actually doing the work. So, you know, this is I think something that's been going on for a long time, and it's nothing new, but it's more obvious and explicit and prevalent now, given how easy it is to kind of see scams and manipulation through technology. It's a lot easier to point out, I feel like, nowadays. But you know, it's I think the damage that's being done is to Haitians who actually need help. The damage is being done is to the people who actually need the help, and also to the people who are giving the money and who are like the audience, essentially, who was trusting these individuals to actually, you know, they trust these individuals, and that's why they follow them, right? They trust their opinions, they trust what they have to say. So they're gonna you have kind of a responsibility to your audience to some extent. And you know, when you abuse that and manipulate it just to make money off of it or not be transparent or accountable, that's a judgment that, you know, I think you should be judged for that, right?
And so there's the question of transparency. Like, you know, we can't accuse anybody because we don't have evidence of people pocketing money, but the lack of transparency, like, we don't know where that money's going, how it's going. There's no, like, we can't trace where it's going to end up. But there's also the question of, you know, the white savior complex. Why are you taking it upon yourself to collect these funds without consulting Haitians who, you know, these Haitian radical organizations, leftist organizations, movements that exist in Haiti and in the diaspora? So why do you feel like you can be the one leading this? It's just, you know, it is, yeah, it just makes no sense at all.
Yeah, it's very blatantly opportunism, but it's under the guise of, you know, being socialist or anti-imperialist or left or being for the people. I think that's what's so, like, let's be honest, that's what's so kind of evil, malicious, and fucked up about it. Like, these people, in my opinion, are very bad. Like, you know, you can't even, it's hard to say exactly how bad, but this is really bad.
At best, some of these some of the stuff is sloppy. Because if you're not self-aware enough to say that, you know, well, wait a minute, maybe this is not a good idea that I put up a GoFundMe to my individual name and bank account. That in itself is just problematic, and it's sloppy. So even if every cent is going towards actual relief and you know, quote unquote solidarity, let's say, right, at the very best, it's sloppy. And as Carlos said, look, we're not going to accuse anyone of anything because we have no proof. But at worst, there's some nefarious stuff going on, and that's just for these, you know, the folks who start coming up with these, you know, one-time campaigns for relief and solidarity and all that stuff. That's not to mention, as Carlos has mentioned before on the program multiple times, there's a whole economy based off of this stuff, of people, you know, becoming experts. I'm gonna call them spicologists. They're fucking, you know what I mean? They're there, you know, speaking on behalf of our people, and niggerologists and spicologists who speak on behalf of our people, and it's this whole white, you know, I call it now the white baby Jesus Marx complex, that they're here to save us all. You know what I mean? They're here, you know, they know the way, right, to save all of us. And it's crazy. Like, we're seeing this stuff, and it's like, you know, with all due respect, and I don't mean, look, I'm not trying to be disrespectful towards anybody. I can have a conversation with anyone. Nick, you and I were having some conversations about some of the anecdotes, you know, on our way to DC in attempts to try to get, the Biden administration to lift the sanctions and blockade of Cuba. I spoke to, I'm not going to say his name, but I spoke to a white guy over at the, Socialist Workers Party. It's a communist, Trotskyist political party, and that individual was saying some wild stuff about, why should I focus on, why should we be focused on race so much? Everything is about class. I need to build, we organize based off of class. Why should I have to, me as a white man now living in 2021, make amends or atone for something that happened in 1800? And I'm listening to this guy, and I mean, I didn't get a chance to respond, but I would have gotten into his ass real quick, in a respectful way, So it's like some white folks are just either they know exactly what they're doing, or they don't know what they're doing, and as well intentioned as they may be, it's important for people like us to sort of check them, and then it's up to them to decide, how to respond. But I mean, look, again, at best, some of this stuff is really sloppy. At worst, there's some nefarious stuff going on, and that's separate from the conversation of, again, there's a whole network now. There's a whole combine now of Western, white, socialists and communists and progressive intellectuals that have become, again, I'll call them spicologists. They know our people better than we know our people, and they know, and it's crazy. It's just crazy, and they get all types of platforms. They get to write out, they get to write and appear at certain places and speak on our behalf, and it's crazy. Like, we don't have people that can do this, right, whether it be here or in Latin America. It's crazy.
Right. And so we also have to speak about, like, what is our position on the role of white people in our movement. We as Anticonquista, we have experience both as Anticonquistas and also as individuals. We all, everybody who takes part in Anticonquista are involved in local movements within our own communities who work with white people, and personally, I do think there's a role for white people. I don't think that white people should be completely shunned and that we should just completely cut them from the movement and do our separate thing. That, well, first of all, it's not realistic, and I don't think it's practical. But as an organization, as Anticonquista, we have had first-hand experience recently. Like, we experimented in opening up our organization to different people, including some white people, and it ended up in the same type of self-centered behavior, egotism, not being able to kind of humble themselves, have some respect for the space, and it's always like the same old things that you see everywhere: white saviorism, white egocentrism, all kind. So it's difficult. It's very difficult. And in general terms, like, we do need to have a discussion as Latin Americans in terms of what are we gonna do. What is the place of white people in our movement? How much power, how much space and power are we gonna give white people in the movement? Because we can't ignore the reality that white people have in our society, which is a culture of, even the most progressive white people and us ourselves, we're conditioned. They are, and we are conditioned to think of white people as better, as their voices hold more weight. They're better at leading things. They're better at organizing things. They're better at this. They're better at that. Even if we don't, as leftists and progressives who speak about white supremacy, we might not discuss it and admit it, but it happens. It happens all the time in progressive movements where we uphold white people as if they're better than us. And I think, to be completely honest with everybody, I think it's happened a little bit in the last year or so in Anticonquista, it did happen somewhat that white people took advantage of our space, and we didn't have the ability to kind of limit that a little bit. Now I think we have, but yeah, it's a difficult thing.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's not. I mean, I agree with both Victor and Carlos. The only thing I would add too is, I guess the message for the audience is, well, because what happened after Haiti? It's crazy. As soon as the disaster happened, immediately all of these GoFundMe's pop up. Okay, here's a GoFundMe. I have go donate to my GoFundMe. It's connected to my account. It's just me, but I have contacts in Haiti, and this is coming from white folks. Or even before, I was following another person. I was following, actually, if you go back to our program with the Haiti Info Project, right? There's a white guy who runs and he's a progressive, and he's a reporter, a Haitian reporter, journalist. He speaks Creole, and he I'll just give his name. It's Kim Ives, right? He went to Haiti right before the earthquake. This is the same guy who was putting out information on Haiti. He has there's a newspaper or magazine called Haiti Liberté. He was putting out information that one of the gang leaders in Haiti was a revolutionary, which was completely antithetical to what every Haitian was saying. Every Haitian actually from Haiti, completely antithetical to what they were saying, because this gang leader was directly complicit and linked to massacres in very poor neighborhoods like the La Saline massacre. And now here's this white guy who claims to be a Haitian expert going to Haiti, right, with other progressive journalists who I won't get into that, but going to Haiti with other progressive journalists and claiming to be doing work on the ground. Look, he's already putting out misinformation about what's going on in Haiti. Why would you continue to platform him and give him a space to put out more misinformation? Why would you give him money? Why would you why would you continue to support this person, right? He doesn't it's not even that he doesn't speak for our people. He doesn't speak for our people, but he's doubling down on that, speaking for our people and putting out misinformation. And that's what these folks do, because they don't understand the context, they don't understand the community, and they don't understand the culture. I could give 100 more examples of right here in Newark, right? We had and this is kind of going back to what Carlos was talking about, some of the things with Anticonquista. We had Newark, for those who don't know, Newark, New Jersey is 60% black, 30% Latino. And we have a strong immigrant population and a strong black population. We had in April rallies for Andrés Arauz, who the president of Ecuador, the guy who was running for Ecuador, progressive, supported by Rafael Correa. So this anti-war organization for New Jersey comes to Newark to hold a rally with Andrés Arauz's campaign. And again, Newark's black and brown city, right? I attend the rally. These organizers are almost all older white folks, right? Now there are some younger white folks, and they were really cool. They said some dope shit. They got the support from the community. But my problem was with this older white leadership. They came into a black and brown city with mostly other older white folks, not representing the community at all, trying to hold a solidarity rally with Ecuador. And I'm like, bro, there are thousands of Ecuadorians, Colombians, thousands of people who could relate to this solidarity rally. But because you're not invested in the community, nor do you represent the community, and on top of that, you're going out there and one of these, I'll give an example. One of these old white ladies, she starts singing a song in Spanish, mispronouncing the words. I'm like, how the fuck? Like, how do you expect to get the community to come and feel like connected to this? Right. The main organizer, after the rally ends, comes up to us. I'm speaking with some of the Ecuadorian comrades from Andrés Arauz's campaign. He comes up to us at the end and he's like, I've been doing this for a long time. I don't really know specifically what's going on in Ecuador. I was like, what the fuck? He's like, I don't know specifically what's going on in Ecuador, but I know generally, like, U.S. imperialism, Latin America has been pretty bad. I'm like, how the fuck are you the leader of this rally and you don't even know the specific like politics or what's happening in Ecuador right now? Like you know, this is why I love that meme. It was like the caucasity. It's like some of these white folks have just the audacity and the courage that I think our people, you know, never had, because that shit was beaten and tortured out of us, right? Mm-hmm. The repression scared the shit out of us. But these white folks, they never had that, and so they're out here doing shit. I'm thinking, what the fuck? Like, I would never do something like that, man. I would never do some shit like that. It's crazy.
And exactly. It's like, put ourselves as Latin Americans. Let's put ourselves in the position, in this position. Let's say we started talking for Black people in the community, going to rallies and talking for Black people, about Black people. That's ridiculous. Like, there's Black people that can speak for themselves. Like, why are you gonna take that space? Like, that's what we let white people do in the Latin American community. I don't know why. And also to say, like, we, you know, a lot of people watching this, and I know there's gonna be what I would call orthodox, dogmatic, you know, the classic Marxists who are gonna say, oh, this is just the identity politics line. Like, you know, that's not a Marxist line. Why are you trying to divide the struggle into white and Black? But no, we're third worldist. We don't believe in identity. We don't think that the struggle is purely identity politics. We're Marxists. We're scientific socialists. As scientific socialists, we recognize that white people have a particular role, a particular history in our communities, and that means that it does reconfigure you know, the way we treat white people and the way white people treat us and the way we see and you know, there's still such a kind of ingrained culture of seeing white people as superior to us, to the point that we let them lead our movements, which is ridiculous. And as Marxists, as scientific socialists, and as Latin Americans, we need to begin to tackle that. We need to begin to have that conversation, and we need to have it from a Marxist perspective rather than, you know, from the usual identity politics perspective, which is not going to be like, you know, from criticizing the role of white people within our movement from a purely identity politics perspective is not going to be helpful either, because, you know, it's at the end of the day, like, a lot of the identity politics people aren't anti-capitalist, and, you know, it's all going to be like, you know, very superficial things as well. So yeah, we do have to come at it. I don't know if it exists elsewhere, if there's a conversation elsewhere of Latin Americans from a Marxist, from a radical perspective, criticizing and seeing what we could do about how to deal with white people in our spaces.
So, couple things I just want to add to that. You know, it's bad enough that white supremacy as a system is extremely, you know, I'm going to be polite, divisive, right? It's bad enough that we have to deal with that, right? But then, to Carlos's point, you know, the very orthodox, quote unquote, communists or socialists or whatever, or you know, now you got these progressives and socialists coming up with and they're divisive because our people fall into this trap and are being led by these people. So now we got within our own communities, now we're fighting each other over this stuff, right? Because I make the argument, you know, that we need to follow. I'd rather be led. I'm gonna just say I'd rather be led by my own people. Let's just be clear. And you know what's interesting? It leads me to my next point. In Latin America, you're having these talks about plurinationalism. You know, Evo Morales is big on this, right? He's talking about this all over the place, right? Like, would anybody go to Latin America right now, have the audacity to go to Latin America right now and tell an indigenous movement or indigenous leader, hey, you know, that's identity politics. Get the fuck out of here with that shit. Nobody would dare say that right now to an indigenous leader or movement in Latin America, saying, well, no, that's identity politics. No, man, they have, you know, we just had the brother on from Nicaragua, you know, earlier this week. Right. And what is the state? What are the Sandinistas doing for those people? Saying, y'all got your own shit. Y'all got your own thing going on. How can the state support you? That's solidarity. That's solidarity. Y'all want to govern yourselves? Y'all need an autonomous region? How can we help you? Right? No. That's identity politics, and you are being divisive. Like, that's the crazy part about it. Then they call us divisive, right? And just one other point. Like, I'm just curious to what would these people tell Malcolm X or the Black Panther Party or the Young Lords back in the day? Like, and this is a question of power. This is a question of power. It makes me realize, you know what? Until we create something. And this conversation, by the way, Nick and I yesterday went to we were at the People's Church, you know, where the Young Lords did their thing, you know, whatever it was, 40, 50 years ago. And we watched the documentary, The Takeover. So Carlito Rovira was there, so was Felipe Luciano from the Young Lords. And this question kept coming up, you know, of us doing for ourselves. You know, there's 60 million Latinos of us here in the United States, you know, so it lets me know, like, you know what, we gotta, and again, this came up yesterday. We don't need to recreate the Young Lords per se, right? You know, as Carlito Rovira has said, you know, you can't go into a graveyard, right, and bring somebody back to life, right? That just doesn't work, right? So but we do have a blueprint there, right? The Young Lords is something we can study and analyze. You know, the movements in Latin America, those are things that we can study and analyze. And that's what we've been saying is, like, why do we need to, you know, constantly look towards white people as an example of how to fight back, or for them, you know, look, let's hope for some, again, the baby Jesus white marks to come and save. Like, we don't need, you know, we need is solidarity. We need real solidarity, not in rhetoric, not in these phony tokenism bullshit things that they do in the political parties. And, you know, no, real solidarity, you know, and I'll mention Carlito one more time, because Carlito will often say, we don't need to recreate a new gold standard for what that looks like, and I've said it here. If you want to be down, be John Brown. You have to be able to make some sacrifices, real sacrifices, and allow us to lead.
Mm-hmm. But it's difficult for white people to let us lead, because white people are, even white progressives have this idea that, they're, the savior complex idea, that, these Latinos, 60 million Latinos, they can't lead themselves. We need just the 10 white progressive journalists to speak for us, because the 60 million Latinos in the US, who I'm guessing a lot, maybe hundreds of thousands are trained progressive radical journalists. They can't speak for us, which is ridiculous. And it, moving on to the point of the patrons, the journalists and their patrons making a career. Some of these journalists are getting good amount of money a month from patrons, subscriptions, talking on behalf of Latin Americans. And unfortunately, that culture, I think maybe we go into that a little bit, but that culture is feeding our own people and giving them ideas of being individuals, careerists who make a living out of only talking, or what did you call them, Victor's speakologists, or being speakologists for
So for folks at home, we all know the N-word, right? I mean, shit. The spick word, I will say that shit publicly too. Just like when they asked Paul Mooney, real quick, and Carlos, pardon me, but so they asked Paul Mooney one time, the black comedian, are you ever gonna stop using the N-word? I think he did at one point, but I think he started using it again. And he says, no, I say nigga 100 times a day, every single morning. It keeps my teeth white. So I often remind folks of that word spick. It's in the English language. You can look it up. If you go on Google right now, pull up Merriam-Webster's dictionary, it's still in there. I didn't make it up. It's there. So it's a pejorative, right? It's a term used, a denigrating term used against our people because, you know, again, it's again very much like the N-word, right? So yeah, I call these motherfuckers spicologists. Like they go to school and they study us like lab rats, and then they speak on our behalf and they say, we know, you know, what these people want and what these people need and how to lead them. But go ahead, the spicologists.
But yeah, and it's unfortunate that our own people, our own progressives, radicals, are starting to be influenced by this culture, being individualists who are talking about Latin America, but only to gain subscribers to their channel, only to gain subscriptions to their Patreon and followers on Instagram and views on YouTube. But like, what are you doing? Like, you know, if we're leftists, then it should be more than that. It shouldn't be about our individual careers. It should be about helping our movement. Yes, providing information, but what are we gonna do with the subscriptions of those patrons? It can't be about about making careers and being self-interested. It has to be. We have to, I guess, as our, you know, we lead by example as ANTICONQUISTA in terms of doing the work that we do, providing information, and all of the subscriptions that we get, giving it back to the movement, because that's what it is. We don't benefit individually from this at all, and that's how it should be, because we're, you know, this whole thing. The reason why we have 32 or however 32,000 on Instagram and 25,000 on Twitter isn't because of the work of one individual. It's because of a collective work. And the reason why they follow us is because people are interested in Latin America and how we're going to help Latin America. It isn't about individuals and helping individuals and furthering their career. That's such a white Western way of doing things, and you know, it needs to end.
The question, I was gonna say, the question should be, what are they doing for the community, right? What are they doing for the communities that they? Because the other thing too is some of these folks, they either go back and forth from, you know, wherever they're from, Western Europe or the U.S. to Latin America, and, you know, go back and forth, or they embed themselves in Latin America. It's like, well, what are you giving back to that community? You know, sure, you're educating, but you're making money off of, you know, when there's a disaster. And it's not just Latin America too. I want to make it clear. People do this now for all over the world. For Palestine, there's a big place that this happens. You know, and so, you know, when people do this kind of shit, it's like, okay, you're making money, but you only show up when there's a disaster. You only show up when there's an emergency. You report on it. You make your money, and then what? You didn't do anything to alleviate people's, you know, conditions. You didn't do anything to help people. And I want to go back to what you said at first, Carlos, about how people think that we can't lead ourselves. It was during that documentary yesterday about the young lords that the something interesting was said, and it was when the police chief said that, you know, he talked about, wow, you know, these young Latinos, these young Puerto Ricans in the Young Lords Party, they're so smart. Like, they took over Lincoln Hospital. Like, they're so smart. And I think it was we were driving back, Victor, and I think it was Carlito's wife, right, who said something really good. She said, you know why they said the Puerto Ricans and the Young Lords were so smart when they took over Lincoln Hospital? That's because they weren't expecting them to actually do something that would disrupt the system. They weren't expecting young Latinos or young oppressed people to actually do something that's destructive. They didn't think that we could organize and strategize and have our own leadership and build that without them, right? And that's true, right? That's
an excellent point, Nick. That's an excellent point, and it goes to show these white careerists, journalists, so-called progressives who are speaking for our people. They haven't lived the shit that we've been through. They haven't lived the shit that we've been through. They don't feel as invested in trying to change the shit that, you know, that made us flee our home countries, or that as a diaspora, you know, a lot of us living in poor neighborhoods and in horrible conditions. They haven't lived all of that shit that we've lived. So we're dangerous. You know, if we were to have the same popularity, the same Patreon subscriptions, we would be very fucking dangerous. But they're not dangerous. You know, they're just, you know, they might talk and they might inform people about what's going on in Latin America, but they're not dangerous because in fact they're the opposite of fucking dangerous, because all the subscriptions, all the tangible things that can come from this whole movement that they're creating is them investing back into the system through their careers, you know, maybe putting down a deposit with the subscription money, putting down a deposit for their homes and buying into the system. And what happens when they get a mortgage and buy their homes, and they have no interest in social transformation, revolutionary transformation. They might even buy a fucking house in Latin America, in a Latin American country, and become white landowners in a country, and then in their old age be like, you know what, yeah, I wouldn't benefit from a fucking revolution in this country and a redistribution of wealth and land and so on. You know, and it's just super fucking problematic.
Right. And I would say too, you start to see that in some of their ideology. Some of these folks we're talking about, they have shaped and kind of I don't know, I want to say like they bastardized Marxist ideology in order to fit their own personal material conditions, in order to fit, or in order to justify what they're doing right now. And so they've teaching people this kind of really like disfigured, disformed Marxist ideology that I can't imagine, that we personally don't agree with. And we've acknowledged this. We made this point. And they're doing this, in my opinion, in order to justify these things that were this opportunism and careerism that we're talking about.
I want to bring up the documentary that we watched yesterday because it ties into this. When it does come out, and I think Nick, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we heard it something in October or something like that. It's when it's going to come out. Yeah. So the takeover about the Young Lords. It's like 45 minutes, 50 minutes. It wasn't very long.
Yeah, it's real short.
It's real short, and it's amazing, and it's an example of what can happen when revolutionary Black and brown people have power. And in this, at this moment right now, until we figure that out again, and I say again because again, we got to go back to that time. We got to go back to the Panthers, Malcolm X, the Young Lords, because they posed a legitimate threat to the capitalist system.
Mm.
And you can't say that about any movement since. You hear all these people on YouTube, all these, you know, all these quote unquote, you know, communists and socialists talking about, you know, you have to organize the masses. You have to organize the I don't know what the fuck they're talking about. I don't, they're saying like, we don't know that. Right. And they're just, it's a lot of this theoretical stuff and the stuff that just takes place on YouTube. You know, until we figure out how we can replicate that model of the Panthers and the Young Lords, and yes, let's provide some to try to conceptualize that, some imagery. You had young Black and brown folks with guns in their hands and reading Marx and reading Lenin and reading you know, that's fucking dangerous as fuck. That's dangerous as fuck. And then creating all types of alliances all over the place, including with white progressives and white revolutionaries. But who was in the driver's seat? It was our people. And that posed a legitimate threat to the entire system.
And real quick, Victor, too, it wasn't like they were reading Marx and Lenin, and we heard it yesterday. They were reading Mao, but you know what they emphasized? They were reading Fanon. They were learning about our people's history and culture.
Right.
Because here's the thing, I can speak as a Puerto Rican, right? What happens to a lot of Puerto Ricans? You come here to the States, and you lose a lot of that identity. And it's not, again, this isn't even, I would say this isn't even unique to Puerto Ricans. This is unique to every immigrant group all over the world that moves out of their nation, you know, usually not voluntarily, right? You start to lose some of that identity. And so what did the Black Panthers and the Young Lords and all the other, you know, AIM, all of the Chicano nationalist groups, what did they all do? They taught people their own history. They were like, yeah, we're socialists. Yeah, we're Marxists. We're anti-imperialists. But we don't need to go all the way to the Soviet Union to learn that shit. We don't need to go back 30, 40 years to learn that shit. We can go back 10 years because our people were fighting this shit, you know, for much longer. Our people were fighting colonialism for longer than the white folks even knew what the fuck colonialism was, right? Before they can, and they were the colonizers, so they didn't even know. So, you know, we one of the things that they emphasized, and they talked about this yesterday after the film, was they were teaching people about their own history, and they were trying to do that revival of our own identities. And that's something that I think we're trying to do here through Anticonquista.
Yeah, and I also add to that, and you know, Victor was saying, like, so we need to get back to what the Young Lords, what the Panthers were doing. But it has to be, like Mariátegui said, for us right now as a diaspora in Latin America, it has to be a heroic creation. A heroic creation. We have to be heroic because right now we're very passive. You know, the fact that we're letting white people, many times white liberals or white people who are neutral and very, like, you know, here and there, speak for us, is a testament to our passivity right now as a people, as a diaspora. And so we have to be heroic. We have to be courageous. We have to be like, you know what? No, we can't let these white people talk for us. We have to be, you know, at Anticonquista, none of us are trained journalists.
Right.
I myself, you know, I'm, people tell you, like, people who know me personally, I'm not into public speaking usually. It takes a lot of work to be like, you know what, yeah, for the sake of like trying to attempt to do something, at least the very least we could do is speak up for our people. It does take courage, and I think that's what we need to do as a people, generally, as a community. We need to be like, you know what, no, we can't. And it takes courage to stand up to white people as well, and in a respectful way. Like, you know, we're not saying like aggressively and antagonistically be like, you know, fuck off and get out of here. No, we just need to respectfully be like, you know what, friendly white journalist who's attempting to speak for us, we don't need you to speak for us. You can, you know, go ahead and apply for a job at the New York Times or, like, I don't know, the progressive white liberal media if you want to, but the radical spaces, the leftist spaces, the spaces that our people listen to or should be listening to is going to be occupied by us, because it's our history, it's our homeland, it's our conditions that we live in the diaspora, in the neighborhoods, in the working class neighborhoods, as immigrants and so on. We don't need you to speak for us. It's bullshit. It's some bullshit. And yeah, and respectfully, just tell them. And if they don't like it, then they can go elsewhere and not support us and not be part of the movement. But if they're respectful back, what they'll do is be like, you know what, you're right. We're gonna take the back seat. We're gonna support you. We're gonna, if you're a white journalist who has a big platform, be like, you know what, take the center stage on my platform as well. Take some of our Patreon. That's what the white journalists, the white left who is serious and who want to be respectful to us should be doing.
Right. And I wanna mention two things real quick, Victor. I'll mention these two things real quick. So we had this discussion the other day, and I think this goes back into, you know, whoever is leading this movement oftentimes shapes what ends up being the main focus or what ends up being, you know, the most talked about issue. And sometimes when it's these white folks, we get thrown way off track and we lose base with our own people and our own struggles. And the one place that stands out the most to me is in the the fight for political prisoners, right? And this stands out to me the most because, look, I think there's a lot of political prisoners out there, but the ones who are getting the most attention right now are not the ones that came from our communities. the ones who are getting the most attention right now, you know, and you throw out the names.
Please repeat that shit.
Right, the ones, the political prisoners who are being paid the most attention right now, who are given the most platforms, most visibility, are not from our communities, right? They look, who are they? They're Julian Assange, Chelsea Manning, and why, you know, and the list goes on and on. And I'm not saying that these folks are not courageous, they're not brave. I'm not saying that, you know, what they did was wrong or right. You know, I learned some from WikiLeaks and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, we still have Puerto Ricans who are in prison right now in the US that are getting ignored. And instead, you got more people talking about Julian Assange. We still have Mumia, right? Is still in prison right now, right? For a crime he didn't commit, for a murder that he never committed, right? We still have, you know, people like Russell Maroon Schultz, and we were talking about him yesterday at the documentary, and the conditions, you know, the health conditions, the serious health conditions that he's facing right now while in prison, right? And none of these folks, they have been in prison longer than Assange. They have been in prison, you know, they have been in worse conditions than Assange. Straight up, like this is just facts, right? And they have probably done more for our communities and our peoples, right, than many of these white folks did. But they do not have the same platform. They do not have the same support. They do not have the same name recognition, right? And the list, there's so many. I see people throwing more names. Mutulu Shakur is another one. The names can go on and on and on and on. Right?
Simon Trinidad, the Colombian guerrilla fighter that was kidnapped from Ecuador and has been in a prison in Florida since like 2004 or 3.
Exactly. And a lot of these names, I was talking to someone at the DC rally for Cuba, and I remember I threw out some of these political prisoner names, and you know, he didn't know of them, and I don't pass judge. I didn't think that's a bad thing. I think the reason why folks don't know is because they're not being taught, because the leadership or the people who you know take up the most space, these white folks they don't care about these. They don't care about our political prisoners. They don't care about, and so it's not a lack of education. It's a miseducation, right? They're intentionally misleading people. So you focus on these white folks who are, you know, all about whatever bullshit that they're doing, right? Because the other thing too is look, a lot of these white folks who are these political prisoners are also former stooges and were literally former soldiers for the imperialists. Whereas our political prisoners were never soldiers for the imperialists. They were always fighting against that shit. And so it's like, you know, the leadership of white folks, we see it very clearly in who gets platformed, what struggle gets focused on, and what struggles don't get focused on, right? The other thing I wanted to mention Oh no, I was gonna say the other thing I was gonna mention too is probably a little bit off topic, but you can go ahead, Victor.
I think Carlos was going to say something.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say also also just thinking about, you know, this conversation that we're having makes me also think of other things. There's just so many things that are problematic in terms of like white lefties or white progressives, white liberals talking about Latin America, particularly, like, you know, the news in Latin America. All right, so objectively, they can give like a good account. Like a lot of them do give a good account of what's going on in Bolivia and Venezuela and Cuba and so on. It's great for information, but it's not the only thing they do. Sometimes they'll they'll give like a good account, good news coverage of what's going on in Latin America, but then they have other topics that they'll talk about as well, which mislead our people. You know, if they're liberals, they're gonna be talking about some liberal shit in another segment that misleads our people. If they're orthodox Marxist, dogmatic Marxist, Eurocentric Marxists, they can be talking some shit that's going to mislead our people in terms of Marxism as well. So, you know, there's just so many things wrong with white people leading us, leading the left, like, and leading, particularly now, like, I guess what we're trying to do right now is the left online, the media, the lefty white lefty media that has more recently in the last few years began to monopolize news coverage and analysis of of our people, both in the diaspora and in the homeland. So yeah, we have to tackle that. And the most practical way right now, if you guys are interested, is supporting us, Anticonquista, or supporting other Latin American comrades who are doing similar work to us. Yeah.
And not because of anything else other than we're actually trying, like, one, we're actually providing really good analysis. That's one. Yeah. And we're like, right, we're brown folks, we're Latinos. But two, again, we've mentioned this a bunch of times. We've donated over $100,000 now to that, things that change actual, certain material conditions. Nick, we bumped into Radames yesterday from La Fuerza. I said, Radames, how you doing? So we were just recently donated to La Fuerza. I'm like, hey, so I keep bumping into Radames. He's a member of La Fuerza de la Revolución. Again, a political party in the Dominican Republic, communist political party in the Dominican Republic, but he's here in the diaspora. He represents La Fuerza in New York City. So we bumped it. He was at the viewing yesterday. And I said, yeah, we just, our group just donated to La Fuerza. He goes, oh, that was you. I was like, yeah. He's like, oh man, thank you, because the headquarters need some help, so, yes, rock with us, not because of anything else other than we're actually, we're providing really good analysis. And we're also actually helping the cause. And that's not to, let's be clear, we don't think that highly of ourselves to think that we're able. Latin Americans don't need our help, but they will use our help, right? Like they're whatever they're doing right now, they're gonna just keep doing it, right? So it's not like we're over here being some, commanding troops from the diaspora. That's not happening. Latin Americans are fighting for socialism. That's happening, But we're just, any little bit that we can help and contribute, that's solidarity. That's real solidarity, right? So I just want to acknowledge some of the comments here, because we got 60 people watching right now, and I seen some of the comments, and so I want to acknowledge some of the stuff. And we appreciate y'all. We can't do any of the stuff without you folks. So we really appreciate y'all. Let's see here. So all the money is spent. I'm just going to read off some of the comments. So all the money is spent on the overhead of the organization helping, quote unquote, helping the people. So that's, this person gets it. That was ill state fishing. Let's see here. This is AR. That literally happens all the time. Anglo voices are the only quote unquote legitimate voices. Again, another person who gets it. I was told, same person, AR. I was told by Canadian academics that Cuban literature was not a legitimate source for academia. Like, this is crazy. Let's see here.
Before you read the other comments, Victor, also a point to make is, I think the reason why these white journalists are given more attention than, for example, us, is because, they're thought of as professional, like it's a reliable news source. We're fucking reliable too. We use reliable sources. You can come to us. We're not just making shit up. Like, we're not Trump, and also we're not conspiracy theorists. We don't talk shit out of our ass. We are educated, educated Latin Americans who know our stuff. We have reliable sources. We're very well read. Some of us are in academia, some of us are not in academia, but we are well read. We know what we're talking about. You can trust us.
And we have links, tenemos vínculos all over Latin America. We have connections all over the place. With the right people.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, we have exactly that as well. We have primary sources. We have primary sources of information all over Latin America that we often use here on our YouTube channel as well. Talking to them and asking them what's happening on the ground and so on, and also other commentators of the diaspora, the Black and the Latin American diaspora, who are people who do this all their lives, like studying the situation. All of their lives are dedicated to this. So we are most definitely, we're a reliable news source, and we're also reliable because we live that shit ourselves as well.
I just want to point to because again, going back to Haiti real quick, like some of the funds that we're looking at that we see as reliable, that Haitians have said are reliable and are very best. I'll share my screen real quick, but like it's the Haiti Emergency Relief Fund. is the one that we know of that is actually the most reliable, right? That is, let me share it real quick. Can y'all see that?
Yeah.
So this is the one that we see as being the most reliable, and that not that we see, but that we've heard from Haitians, right? From Haitian organizations in Haiti and in the diaspora is verified, the most reliable, right? Verified, well known. It's been around for a lot. It's not something that just came up after this earthquake. It's something that's been around for decades. They work closely with, and they help, Aristide, who is, one of the most popular progressive presidents that Haitians overwhelmingly support. And so, these organizations, people should be showing you and should be guiding you to organizations and funds like that, not organizations or funds that go towards either themselves individually, that go to their Patreons, that go to whatever media platforms they're on Patreons, like none of that shit. It should be organizations like that are well known and legitimate and have been verified by other groups and individuals. And two, I want to add what Carlos just said about how we're a legitimate source. Look, there are progressive channels, and these channels are they're not socialist. They make it known, but they're not liberal. They're progressive. They're like social democratic channels. Who in my opinion, I've seen some of the claims that they have made are doing less, are putting out more misinformation than they are putting out accurate information. They're actually, progressive social democratic channels who still spew conspiracies, right? Without any information, without verified information, who really aren't putting in the work that, like in terms of verifying and legitimating their sources, that they should be. And yet they have pretty big platforms and they have a pretty big following and this and that. And it's kind of, it's kind of BS, right? It's like, how are these individuals getting such a big platform, big following, and they're putting out either shitty analysis. And again, these aren't socialists, so you can't say it's a bad socialist analysis. It's, even for progressives, I'm saying though, it's a bad analysis. Even as someone who considers himself on the left, it's a bad analysis. So it's like, how come, how are these folks getting a bigger platform than we are? And they're putting in half the work, that's what's crazy to me.
Yeah, no, and to add to that, you'll see often, again, white liberals, progressives, socialist, communists have policy and political critiques of some of these movements, and that helps shift and shape public opinion on this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So that's dangerous. That's extremely dangerous, especially for our people. Right. One person I can bring up, what's his name? The guy on HBO. He he's another one.
Oh, John Oliver.
John Oliver. I can't stand the dude. I cannot stand the dude. This is a white guy that often will talk about Latin American politics as if he's some sort of authority on it.
Right.
And again, this guy's got a huge following.
Yeah.
Got a huge following. So it could be very confusing for people because he may be dead on certain things that are happening domestically, and then he transitions and talks shit about, the Chavistas or the Sandinists, so on and so forth. And people fall into that stuff. So, again, Carlos has talked about this before. I like the way he phrased that. There's a whole economy. There's a whole combine, if you will, now. There's a Western media and a Western socialist communist combine, white combine that pretends to know what's going on in our communities and in Latin America and pretends to be an authority and authoritative figures on this stuff. Getting back to I want to, something I want to do today. I want to acknowledge some of these comments because people have been very active and I just want to, acknowledge these folks. Someone who always is always following us here every week. I hope I'm pronouncing the name here correctly here. Anon No Names. A lot of these white leftists would be calling the Black nationalists, Puerto Rican nationalists, and Chicano nationalist movements in the 60s reactionary over their speeches. Right on. no matter how educated someone is, when they use that knowledge to condescend others or patronize, especially minorities and socially disadvantaged people, it is revealing of their own biases. I mean, so again, some of these comments have been right on. Someone mentioned, are you guys talking about X and X? I'm not even going to mention the names, but yeah, I'll leave you, I'll let you folks think about who it is that we're talking about. I mean, it's not hard to figure this stuff out. The question of national liberation for all colonized peoples and internal colonies, a major shortcoming of the Western left. It's why they suck at solidarity and support anti-state subversion. Right on. All the revolutions were made by non-white Marxists.
Should we maybe mention some of them? Not in an antagonistic way, but to kind of give an idea of who we're talking about. And it's not to say, again, like some of these people, some of these channels on, it's not about, we're not saying these are evil people or
right.
We don't want to be antagonistic, but people should know, like, it isn't right that people have this position where they talk for us.
So I'm gonna say yes, we should, and I'll repeat what I said off air, which is that, again, someone I just admire. One of my favorite revolutionaries is Malcolm X. Malcolm X had no qualms about mentioning other people's names and stuff like that. He didn't, and that was part of course. It was part of the course. Like it's not a question of attempting to be disrespectful or anything like that. We're laying out facts. We're telling the truth, and this stuff is dialectical. If folks want to then reach out to us and have a debate about some of the stuff, and we're willing to do that too. We're willing to debate the issues and the merits of people's arguments and whatnot. But yeah, I say why not? I mean, I'll start off. Somebody right here mentioned Caleb Maupin. Caleb is someone who knows a lot. And we've mentioned this before. He's shitted on third worldism, and I encourage folks to check out that one particular piece he did it's on YouTube, because he starts off by initially giving like a third worldist ideology a glowing review, and then he goes on, he transitions and says, but they're wrong. they're wrong. Okay, so how did you transition from they're right on over here, they're right on this issue, they're right on this issue right here, but they're just angry. Those people are just angry. That's not the right way to go. It's just and this is a guy that often it's kind of weird. I follow him, and it's he tends to use the words I and me a lot. You're a communist, and he portrays himself as someone who's like very often it's almost very demagogic, like I'm the guy that's going to lead this communist movement in the United States. I don't know what the fuck he's talking about, but that's one of the guys that just, I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, and people like him are like, you can see like the egotism, the self centrism sweats off him. Like, it's all about him, and more particularly talking. If people want to follow people like him, cool. Especially when they're talking about like the US or whatever, like cool. Speak to your white audience. That's all good. Like, but what particularly for what we're talking about here is the way they talk about Latin America or other parts of the global South. Their analysis is like we're the ultimate authority. Like you come here to learn, about what's going on in these places. But who are you? Like, who gave you the voice? Who gave you the position to talk for the global South, to talk for Latin America? Like, and it's also the arrogance, the way they talk, like about our people is like just super arrogant. And also take into account people like him, like Caleb, do also make personal money out of go and watch his YouTube, and it's all. What's that thing that they do on YouTube where they monetize it?
Super chats,
yeah.
The super chats, you could get a good few £100 in just one, few $100 in just one video. One video. So that's, easily thousands a month off of it. And also writing books about the global South. And selling them and making a ton of money from those books as well. Yeah.
And then there's the PSL and the SWP, and look, I've heard all types of testimonies, if you will, and anecdotes of the PSL, and I almost became a member of the SWP many years ago. I still plug their publishing company because I think it's great, but there are so many contradictions with those organizations, and our people are, I get it. There aren't, and this is why I've said this on the program before. I think at some point, whether it's us that we created or someone else who's more capable and more, let's just say either politically theoretically advanced and has better organizational skills. I don't have an ego in this. I don't have a problem saying any of that stuff. But we need a brown revolutionary party from coast to coast. But so I get why people go into the PSL and the SWP or Communist Party USA. That's another one, Communist Party USA, because people are attracted to socialism. They're attracted to communism. And so where are you going to go, right? There's only a few places you can go. The problem is that the leadership is predominantly white, and they have these white attitudes, and it's white Marxism. There's no other way to put it. It's white Marxism. I'll tell the story. I didn't get permission to tell the story, so I won't mention all the names and everything like that. But within the PSL, they had someone from the Politburo, the Central Committee, who's black, write an anti-black nationalism piece. I haven't read the piece myself. I've seen the piece, but I haven't read it. And so let's just say someone else from the PSL went straight to some of the higher ups and said, next time, why don't you guys, went to the writer himself and said, hey, next time, why don't you just let the white Marxists write the piece for you, and then you can just slap your name on it. Like, this is the shit that our people are falling into. You know what I mean? And again, if people think that they're, Carlos, you've said this before. If people think that we're trying to be antagonistic and we're trying to be divisive, the world is already fucking divisive. Like, this is what it is. We didn't create none of this stuff. We're pointing out, these are observations, these are facts, these are things that we're pointing out as, again, we're materialists. This is what's happening. It's not that we created it. It's not that we're trying to be quote unquote trying to be divisive. This is what it is.
On the divisive argument, real quick, I think that's the stupidest argument I've ever heard people make, because it's like so let me get this straight. It wasn't divisive. Slavery wasn't divisive until the slaves started revolting or rebelling. That's when it became divisive, when the slaves suddenly started getting angry and were like, oh shit, this kind of fucked up. Then it was okay. But before that, if they just, kind of obeyed, then it was not divisive. It was cool. Colonialism wasn't divisive until people in Africa and Latin America rose up and started killing their colonizers. Then it became a divisive issue. And it was like, well, shit, motherfuckers don't like colonialism, turns out. No, it wasn't. That's not what the fuck divisive means. I don't think people know what the fuck divisive is. Like, bro, it was divisive.
Word up, man. Like that, yeah, man. I thank you for saying and putting it in those terms. It's a great way. It's a great way to look at it. Bro. Absolutely.
No, but seriously, like, it was divisive when they landed on the islands. When they first saw Columbus, that shit was divisive. They didn't want that motherfucker there. Right. Like, come on, bro. Right. You really think so it's divisive when people start talking about racism? What the fuck? Like, that is literally some straight up conservative, like, right wing shit. You're right wing at that point. In my opinion, my eyes, you're right wing. We're not being divisive. We're just pointing out issues that already exist. So the
imperialism is a system. Capitalism is a system, right? Colonialism was a system. White supremacy is a system. It's a system.
Mm-hmm.
Can I mention a name? Well, some names. I'll say that some white, and particularly like, I guess as anticonquista, I wouldn't say they're rivals, but people that our sort of followers would go to is people like Ben Norton. What's their thing? The Gray Zone or
the Gray Zone? Yeah.
And also Empire
Files.
So those are the kind of people that do similar work to what we would do. But also, like, if go and see, it's just so white. It's so white, and they have like this kind of camaraderie among them. Like, they invite each other on the show, and yeah, they're just like white saviors talking for us. Like, we don't have Latin Americans who speak good fucking English, who are well educated, who are lefty, who are radical. Not us. Like, you don't have to fucking invite us. We don't care about going on that kind of thing. But like, invite other Latin American radicals that exist. Like, it's Jimmy Dore almost has 1 million fucking followers right now.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And if something's popping off in Latin America, you know who he's grabbing? He's grabbing Ben and Max. And I'm gonna keep it real. They do good work. I'm gonna say that. I can't deny that they do fucking good work. I check out their work. I think they're very good investigative journalists. I think they're very good at what they do. I think people, if all you got from today is that, oh, Anticonquista shitted on Ben and Max, if that's all you got from today, and if somebody wants to take a little clip from something that we said and say, oh, you see, this is what Anticonquista, you're taking things out of context. You're missing the whole fucking point, right? You're missing the entire fucking point. Jimmy Dore will get Ben and Max on his shit all the time, and that's cool, right? But how about they start opening up some doors for our people? And again, like Carlos said, it doesn't have to be fucking us. We don't, but we got people, and there's people in Latin America that they can get.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
We have links that we can give them.
Yeah, man, this is like, so again, just let's be clear about what we're talking about, because people will take things out of context and say, well, this is what Anticonquista said, and that's not what we're saying.
And it's on us as well, Victor, to we're not just saying this to put it on them either. We're saying this to put it on ourselves. It's on ourselves. Like, why are we letting other people talk for us? We point it out to hold ourselves accountable. Like, why are we letting these people lead us, lead the news about us? Why are they the two go-to people? It should be us, and I'm not saying us as Anticonquista either. I'm saying us. Like, if we're journalists, academics, or even just political activists, or even just people who have read up some of our history, or who like to keep informed about the news in Latin America, we need to step up and be like, you know what? No, we can do that shit ourselves. We can speak up ourselves. So yeah, it's exactly, yeah. It's not just about putting it on them and telling them to invite people or to do this or don't do that. It's not about that. It's about us too, about us making sure that there is a space where our own people can come to learn about our news, our history, etc., political analysis, etc. Come to us instead of going to them, or go to them too, but come to us first, where we should be the authority. We should be the authority in our community, and then after, like okay, let's see what Ben and Max are saying.
I would say too, even if you go to like Granma, so the Cuban state paper, go there first before you go to like other folks talking about Cuba. Like,
Cubans can speak for themselves. Yeah, yeah.
Every country in the whole world has its own press, right? Some of the press is going to be bought out by one side or the other, but everyone has their own press, and yet none of that gets the coverage. And it's crazy because these same folks, and here's the problem. First, these same folks will actually use the local coverage and local press that's being done in this country by the people themselves, and they'll use that and they'll just repeat it on their show. That's it's fine if you go there for that, but at the same time, it's like you could easily just find that online from the country themselves, right? So it's like you could, you know, a lot of this shit you could actually get from the original source. But people usually don't do that, and not only do they not do that, but then these folks profit off of doing real simple basic work. Like, look at this shit. Look at how much money they make in an hour. Bro, I've seen some of these streams where just through the chat alone, they can make $200-$300 in 1 hour, and I'm like, that shit's insane. Do you know how much, like, when I was I was working a couple weeks ago, and my job was paying me by something like 18 an hour, 19 an hour. And these motherfuckers are making 100, 200 an hour just talking to a video screen, giving their opinions. And that's crazy to me.
And it's going into the individual pockets as well.
Right.
Another thing is that in the long term, a lot of this tends to also they switch up on us as well.
Right.
I don't know if you guys know, is her name Eva Longoria? No, not Eva Longoria. Is that an actress?
Yeah, that's an actress.
Yeah, sorry. No, it's a woman from the US who I think is a journalist or a writer, and she was very close to Chavez when he was alive. Gollinger. Okay.
She's actually Venezuelan American.
She's Venezuelan American.
She is.
But the point is, they can switch up too, you know. And if they're careerists, if they're individualists, then ultimately they're doing it for their material gain, for their own career. So if our point, in order to further their own career, they need to switch it up a little bit, and you know, maybe not necessarily like switch it up completely and go full right wing, not necessarily, but like become more neutral, become more acceptable, become more palatable. They tend to do that shit. So like today they could be speaking super radical about Venezuela and Cuba and Bolivia and so on. But who's to say it's very easy for them? Who's to say that in a couple of years' time they're gonna be like, you know what? I'm gonna switch up a little bit and expand my audience and attract more followers by becoming more soft, more liberal, more palatable. Yeah. But that's not just the white left either. That's also like our own people can do that too.
And real quick too, I know you mentioned the Empire Files a little bit back, just so people know. We're not the ones. This isn't unique to us. This isn't unique to Latin Americans. This isn't something that's like new too. This isn't a new topic or new discussion. If you know the Empire Files, they did a film on Palestine, on Gaza, maybe like a few years back. You had to pay for this film in order to actually see it, but it was like supposedly a really good film about Palestine. Palestinian activists, longtime Palestinian activists, leaders, organizers, and the one I would point people to, the one I follow and I love his work, Stephen. I can't pronounce. I'm gonna butcher his last name, but Stephen like Salada or something like that, or Salada. But he made a great criticism of Abby and the Empire Files and their work around Palestine, and that is that, look, they go in there speaking for Palestinians, profiting off of war, all right, and oppression, right? Monetizing their work where they're supposed to be amplifying Palestinian voices, and none of that gets seen in Gaza. None of that material resources. Look, if you're socialist, right? If you're actually socialist, then you care about material resources and material change. Right. And I'm only saying this now because I see a lot of people saying dumb shit like, oh, well, why do you care? Why do you care what they do with their money? Why do I care what they do with their money? Because this is about where I'm a socialist. Understand that. I care about material change. Right. So if I care about material change, money leads to material change. Money is a resource that can lead to material change. So if that money is being funneled for your projects and just for your upkeep, that would be like if we at ANTICONQUISTA, all the money we got, all it just went to like our website, holding our store, doing this or that. If we did that, we wouldn't have half the following we would do. We wouldn't be getting the money that we would be getting, right? And not only that, but then we wouldn't even be upholding our own values and our own beliefs, right? Which is to actually further and fund the resistance, to help people and help people materially make a change. right? If we just made money and we just spent all that money on ourselves and our upkeep, we would literally be profiting off of the exploitation, the war, the murder, the deaths and killings of our people. And that's fucked up. There's no other word for other than that. That's just fucked up, right? It's some Democratic Party shit. It's literally what it's literally, people are right now criticizing BLM, the main leadership for Black Lives Matter, for funneling money to the leadership and taking that and not giving that to any of the chapters. That's exactly what some people on the left, and not just socialists, but socialists, progressives, and that's what some of them are actually doing right now. But they're not getting the same criticism as Black Lives Matters, right?
I'm seeing some silly comments here. I'm just going to address them. You know, making accusations that we seem to be a little jealous because people are making money. One, we're not trying to make money. Let's just be clear. Nobody at Anticonquista is making money off of this. If anything, this causes a lot of headaches for us because we're here. We got, you know, I'm doing this, you know, like, again, it's, and I'm saying that jokingly, you know, this is a labor of love, man. Like we got to put our own time in for this stuff, man. I work 40 plus hours a week. You know, when I'm working overtime, I'm a union worker. I work for a public utility company. Sometimes I'm working 60, 70 hours a week, you know, and I'm still doing this, and I'm a father. You know what I mean? Like, so this idea that we're jealous of what? I ain't trying to make any money off of this. I make my own money. I got, you know, so, and we do what we do, you know, in our own private lives. So that's one. Let's just clarify that real quick. And number two, we're a collective, and we tell people, and I've told people, like, join a collective, join an anti-imperialist collective, join an anti-capitalist collective. Like, are we? So I call them. I'm calling these folks, you know, communist peddlers. Like, you got, you know, are you a communist or you're not a communist? You know, are you a socialist or you're not a socialist? Are you a revolutionary or you're not a revolutionary? You know, so it's self-serving. It's self-serving with some of these people who are making money off of you because they're the all-knowing, they're the all-seeing, they have all the solutions, they have all the answers. Get the, like, come on, man. Let's if we're gonna be gangster about this shit, we're gonna be real about this shit. Let's be real then. You know what I mean? So anyways, we're now into an hour 20 minutes, and we have not hit one headline other than our main thing that we wanted to address today, and it was necessary. It was absolutely necessary. Should we any other talking points or perspectives on this particular topic of the white left in Latin America, solidarity or opportunism, before we you know, go into some of the headlines? And Carlos, I know your situation, you're on a time constriction here.
Yeah. So I'll leave you guys to the news headlines in the region. Before I go, I'll just say, you know, in the spirit of, again, like, emphasizing, as Victor has said, and we're not doing this because we're hating on people for no reason. We're not doing this because we're jealous of the people that we're talking about. If you watch the whole video, this is an analysis, conclusion we've come to as Anticonquista, a criticism that we have of ourselves, a criticism we have of white progressives, some of them who are well-meaning, some of them, quite frankly, who are opportunists, who are here to just make money off of the oppression of our people. And we're not here to say that Anticonquista is the best place and that everybody else is shit. It's not that at all. It's more about let's go to our own people before we go to these white liberal media, on white progressive and even white lefty media. Let's go to our own people first. Why not? Why not speak for ourselves? Why not listen to our own people? Not just because, it's not just from an identity politics perspective. It's not just because, it's because they're Latinos. No, it's because, you know, there's a lot of us who are Latin American, radical, Marxist, scientific socialist, journalists, who are educated, who have reliable sources, who have primary sources, who have links to our region, to our homeland. Why not go to us first before going to them? That's our criticism. And also underlying all of that is the fact that It has very much to do with white supremacy, has very much to do with white privilege, white power, putting white people before us, taking white people more seriously, white people having a more weighty voice than us in explaining and analyzing and in informing us about our own people's struggle is ridiculous. And it's true. Like, look it up. You guys can see it all for yourselves online and everywhere on the websites that pop up are popping off in terms of analysis of Latin American news and politics. It's mostly run by white people, and that's our criticism. It has nothing to do with hating on people. Actually, we do hate on some people, the opportunists who make a living off our people. We do most definitely hate on that. But we don't hate on everybody. We recognize that some of these people, like Victor has said, Ben and Max do good work. But we shouldn't be going to them as the authority of Latin American lefty analysis. There's us, there's other people. Maybe we can make a list to put out of Latin American individuals and organizations and media organizations that people could go to rather first. Not saying to boycott these people. We're saying come to us first before going to them. And also to finish off by saying subscribe to us, subscribe to our Patreon, not because it goes to our pockets like it does with them, because it doesn't. It all goes to Latin America and the Caribbean. And also to announce that in the spirit of what we're talking about and to put what we say into practice, we will be donating again, as we have always done, especially with Haiti at the moment. We will be donating to what did we say, Nick?
It's called the Haiti Emergency Relief Fund.
To the Haiti Emergency Relief Fund. In that spirit, in the spirit of being like, you know what, Haitian people and their organizations and their people can do it themselves. We don't need middle people. We don't need saviors. We need to support our own people. We need to support colonized people, and that's what we're going to be doing. So we will be sending funds to them. But yeah, thank you, Nick and Victor, for the conversation. And I'll be looking forward to seeing the rest of the news analysis.
Comrade Carlos, that was well put. I think that's a great way to end that segment there before we continue and go on to the headlines. Thank you.
All right, Comrade, peace.
All right, so we are going to continue on here. We're almost at an hour and 30 minutes, and we appreciate folks tuning in. Let's get into some of these headlines of things that happened over the week. We're going to go right to Nicaragua, where a lot is happening in Nicaragua. Juan Holman Chamorro, general manager of the newspaper La Prensa, was arrested yesterday on charges of customs fraud, as well as laundering money, property, and assets. This took place a day after police raided La Prensa's offices, and representatives of the paper refused to provide Reuters with any comments after being questioned by Reuters. La Prensa is controlled by the Chamorro family, longtime family nemesis of the Sandinistas. And something that I found interesting, I was just researching the Chamorro family. Chamorro family has produced now 6 Nicaraguan presidents. 6. All right. So before we go on to the next headline, Nick, any thoughts on that?
No, I mean, again, this was from Reuters, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Reuters. Yeah.
Right. So this is gonna be the news coverage until the Nicaraguan elections. It's all gonna be about what they're gonna call like repression, arrests, opposition figures, and trying to paint them in ways that are just like glorifying them. All the opposition in Nicaragua is about to get like the Juan Guaido treatment, so it's I imagine this is going to get more and more popular, and I think our job then is we got to get more Nicaraguans to speak to the Sandinista revolution and the Sandinista experience, right? And that kind of history, because this is the empire's media, the propaganda arm of the empire is going to be ramped up so much that it's going to be intense in the next couple months, right?
Yeah. So Nick, you and I have had this conversation. We came up with a possible program of an analysis of power and what power looks like.
Right.
We're communists here at Anticonquista. What's happening in Nicaragua, let's be very clear, is that Ortega and the Sandinistas are not fucking around anymore. They saw what happened when they lost power. The Nicaraguans, the entire country of Nicaragua saw what happened when the Sandinistas lost power. We just had an interview with a Sandinista. I encourage folks to check that out. That was on Tuesday. And he provides a different perspective that's being provided by the Western media outlet in the Western world of Nicaragua being some sort of despotic, dictatorial, tyrannical, hellhole. The Sandinistas are creating socialism in Nicaragua. They're building things. They're building roads, and they have all these projects. Again, I encourage folks to check out the interview with Oscar Smith that we did earlier this week. So Ortega's not fucking around, all right? And so for these groups now that they have certain laws in Nicaragua, and as Oscar Smith, our Sandinista guest, said, the opposition needs to know what's in the Constitution. They need to understand what's written in the law books. And if they're going to be outside of the law, then Ortega's going to use the Ortega administration is going to use everything in their power to do what they have to do to stay in power. And it is what it is. Right. This is a question of power, right? We don't believe in liberal democracy. This isn't, we're not liberals here at Anticonquista, right? We believe in taking power away from people who currently have power, right? The oligarchs who have power, so we can create a different world.
Right. That's exactly right. And that's what's happening. And that's, it's the same thing that happened in Cuba after the revolution there, right? The first thing Fidel did was he consolidated power. And he did that by kicking out all the bourgeois capitalists, right? All the industrialists, all the big landowners. And that's exactly we would argue, and we talked about this, Victor, like you said, we would argue we need more of that.
Right.
So it's
because winning an election that's a small part of it. Winning an election is just a small part of it. Look at in Peru, they're going to have to deal with the oligarchs and the bourgeoisie. They have control of every other institution. So if you think that you're going to just win an election and that's it, we just won the election, let's wave a magic wand, socialism. No, that's not how it works.
Right. Look at what happened in Bolivia.
Absolutely.
Evo won, and they still got it. They still managed to have the coup, right? And that's because they needed to there was the eventually what ended up overturning that coup was the eventual consolidation by MAS and by Evo's by the socialists and the indigenous and the labor union leaders, a consolidation of power against the right wing, against the compradors.
They were able to return back to power in a year or something, a year and change. And
it was a year.
It's unheard of.
Right. It's crazy.
Continuing on, we're going to stick with Nicaragua. Spain. This was awesome. Spain recalls their ambassador to Nicaragua over human rights concerns. Nicaragua responded by saying the following: "We challenge and defy the Kingdom of Spain to take full and true responsibility for its ferocious and brutal colonial neo-colonial history." They said a few other things, and Spain didn't, was like, oh, get out of here with that. They didn't want to hear it. But I thought that was a great response.
Yeah, it's funny to see Spain acting better than a lot of these Latin American countries. Given the history of what they've done here, it's fucking nuts that these Europeans, because the Spanish, Yo, it's crazy to me. I don't know if you ever had interactions with like Spaniards. Like I'm talking about Spain Spaniards. They act like, and they want to claim this like Latino Hispanic identity, but meanwhile, their whole history is that of European colonizers and being white colonizers. And so it's crazy to me when they try to act like better than Latin Americans. You know, that I don't know. I can't stand that shit.
Yeah, well, I just thought that was a great response by the Sandinistas. Like, in other words, who the fuck are you to tell us about, you know? And they pointed out to the internal contradictions of Spain and Spain's history. Spain was not trying to hear that. So it's like, you know, pretty much saying, you know, we're this is our country. Like, we're gonna run shit. This is what we're doing. Like, get out of here. Continuing on, over 5,300 Nicaraguenses have applied for refugee status in the country of Costa Rica. According to a piece written by Reuters, most of these individuals are quote unquote activists or people from civil society organizations. To which I respond with that, fine, get the fuck out. Like, if you don't want to build socialism in Nicaragua, just how Cuba showed those people the door and say, hey, if you don't want, you know, because there were some people who stood in Cuba, who stood to not gain and stood to lose, but they were revolutionaries, and they wanted to build revolution. You know, I'm not saying, you know, you had a huge number of people who did that, but there are cases of that. There have been documented cases of people who said, my family stood to lose, but we wanted to build a revolution.
Right. No, I agree with you, man, 100%. I think it's good that if you can give folks a way out without violence, I think that's what we prefer. Even as socialists, that's what we prefer. Look, if you
100%.
want to stick with your capitalist ideology, cool. Go do that somewhere else. You know.
Right. Absolutely.
And we can avoid any kind of violence, and that's better. You know, it's
Absolutely.
better. It honestly, in my opinion, and this is, you know, moving to Venezuela real quick. It would have been, I think, better if that happened in Venezuela, because then you wouldn't see basically Venezuelan middlemen, businessmen starving their own people by, you know, raising food prices and stuff like that. But, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll get to Venezuela in a little bit. Nicaragua has pulled its ambassadors to, and we've covered some of this, to Mexico, Argentina, Colombia, and Costa Rica. This was a tit for tat situation, as those respective governments did the same. You know, Colombia and Costa Rica sort of expected that. I am shocked about Mexico and Argentina. You know, so I, you know, we'll see how that plays out. You know, I'm hoping Mexico and Argentina could kind of, you know, settle their differences with Nicaragua quickly.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's the same for me. I'm interested to see how that plays out. I got knowing the history of Mexico, not so much on Argentina, but knowing their foreign policy, they're very they're gonna toe the line. They're gonna, you know, appease both sides. If it looks like, you know, this is a power grab by Ortega, and like we've said, if it is, that's not a bad thing, right? That's a good thing that should happen. But if it's gonna appear like that, I can see Mexico kind of going along with this policy of like pulling out its ambassadors and sticking with that, right? Because they want to try to appease both sides. You know, it's too authoritarian or it's not too authoritarian. They're trying to appease the United States. They're trying to appease both the socialists and the capitalists.
Yeah, it's just interesting though, because Mexico's taken. I mean, this is, remember, it was just AMLO. It was AMLO who just gave a speech on Simón Bolívar's birthday,
right?
You know, saying that Cuba should be a World Heritage Site, and right, saying that Cuba is an example of you know, of a country that exemplified, you know, resistance against, you know, empire. So it's just, you know, it's weird that that's their position on Cuba, but that you wouldn't have the same position on Nicaragua. So it's just, it's odd. Again, there may be some other, you know, political thing going on in behind the scenes that we don't know about. U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken has been on the offensive as it relates to Nicaragua. Here's a recent quote by the Secretary of State. The United States views the regime's latest undemocratic and authoritarian actions, driven by Ortega's fear of an electoral loss, as the final blow against Nicaragua's prospects for a free and fair election. If you go to his Twitter account, again, he's ratcheting up the bellicose and belligerent language, you know, as it relates to Nicaragua. So this is definitely not a good thing. It's expected, but it's not a good thing.
Right. Yeah,
moving on to Cuba. I'm sorry.
No, I was gonna say not much to say about that.
Yeah. Moving on to Cuba, U.S. imposes more sanctions on Cuba. This time it is targeting 2 individuals of the Cuban Ministry of Revolutionary Armed Forces, Romarico Vidal Sotomayor Garcia and Pedro Orlando Martinez Fernandez. There's not much else to report on that. I mean, it's the usual, in terms of, again, it seems more of symbolic, but again, as Carlos has pointed out before in prior programs, is that, it could, if Cuban officials, certain Cuban officials are being used as instruments in a good way, for them to do some sort of backdoor, let's say, a deal as it relates to trade and whatnot, because it's difficult to get stuff into Cuba. It could affect things that way. Cuba creates reforms to allow thousands of small and medium-sized businesses to operate. Many state-operated firms will now be operating as private cooperatives or turn into small businesses. Companies are limited to no more than 100 employees. Individuals can only own one business, and there will be public and private partnerships to allow small and medium-sized businesses to work with government.
Right. And we talked about this in the last program, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this kind of goes back, I think, to exactly what we were saying on that program, which is that Cuba has intense restrictions on capitalist development, on the free market, or if you want to call it, or like private development. They have intense restrictions. Like, they know, because they have people here in the U.S., right? They have diplomats here in the U.S. They know what capitalism looks like when it runs rampant and it runs amok, and there's little regulation and there's little limitation on what folks can do. So they've seen how that can damage the economy. And that's what they're trying to avoid, right? And that's why you see, I think one of the craziest things is individuals can only own one business. That here in the US, if people heard that, they would flip out. They would, people would lose their shit. But it's stuff like that that ensures that Cuba is not going to have like these huge chains pop up that are going to be selling like shitty processed food. They're not going to have monopolies or corporations pop up out of nowhere just from one individual who just happened to be wealthy. So they know what they're doing, right? They know what they're doing, and when they implement these reforms.
These are things, again, people are saying that this is a reaction to the July 11th events. That's just, I don't believe that to be true at all. Maybe it provided an impetus to do it now, maybe. But these are talks that have been had in Cuba for many years now. Next headline, we're sticking with Cuba. Data is suggesting that the Cuban vaccines are working against the Delta COVID-19 variant. Less than 1%, to be more specific, 3,000th of a percent of Cubans vaccinated are dying from the Delta variant. I mean, this is just a small fraction of people who are dying once they're vaccinated against the Delta variant. So what that tells us is that up until now, as far as the data is concerned, is that we can say with a high degree of confidence that if you're vaccinated with the Cuban vaccine, you're probably just not going to die from the variant. It's working against the Delta variant.
All right.
According to Reuters, so that piece that I just talked about came out on the 13th, 2 days prior. Reuters did run a piece talking about the headline was "Coronavirus Surge Pushes Cuba's Healthcare System to Brink." Look, the situation there, Cuba right now is trying to vaccinate everyone. That's the whole game plan right now, is to try to vaccinate the entire population. The sooner they can get to 100% vaccination, the sooner they're going to be able to control this situation. The situation in Cuba is dire, and they had, even President Miguel Diaz-Canel has acknowledged that this is really, this is a problem right now, right? The coronavirus surge in Cuba has become a serious problem. Of course, Cuba the revolutionary government of Cuba is doing everything that it can, as it always does, to try to help its population. The conditions that Cuba is living under is what makes this situation difficult.
Right. And two, I want to add to that real quick. So what's coming out now is during those counter protests in what was it, July 11th, right? They got video evidence now in Matanzas. Matanzas was one of the towns basically where you had a surge of COVID cases. So the counter protesters in Matanzas basically the video shows they were attacking, and this is a video interviewing and going through a hospital, children's hospital, with one of the Cuban doctors there. And he's explaining that, look, the counter protesters were here in the streets attacking a children's hospital, attacking COVID testing and vaccination sites. And while at the same time, they were doing a social media campaign saying that the Cuban government is not responding to the coronavirus pandemic adequately. So you saw.
I saw some of the interviews. I mean, it was right. You could hear their voices that they were terrified of what was happening as it was happening. Like you could hear as they start giving accounts of what happened.
Right. It's crazy because it's like you're living in two different worlds. The world here in the diaspora, we're getting told that, you know, the Cuban government's oppressive, they're killing people, they're not doing enough for the pandemic. On the ground, it's the exact opposite. It's the people who, you know, they're trying to throw money behind and support who are doing these killings and doing this damage. Right.
Absolutely. Let's continue on here. So the U.S. continues to talk about helping Cubans access the internet. This is a big push by the Cuban American lobby, by the imperialists, by the Joe Biden administration, by many folks in Congress. There's a reason for that. There's a reason why they want to do that, is because the empire is desperate. They're trying everything, and everything that they've thrown at the Cubans since 1959 has failed, right? The embargo, the blockade is a failure. The assassination attempts on Fidel Castro's life, those were failure, over 600 of them, apparently. Trying to isolate the Cubans, from an international perspective, if you will, right? Threatening other countries and other transnational corporations. That policy everything has failed. So what is it resorting to? It continues to pump money to opposition groups in Cuba. It continues to use culture as a way to try to bring about quote unquote change or try to destabilize the country. And they realize that now in this new age, this new information technology age, that the internet is something that could be used to organize and foment, basically a civil war in Cuba. And so that leads me to my next headline over here. Reuters has confirmed that protests originated have origins in Miami. All right, so this one I'm going to actually bring it up if folks would just bear with me here.
I could speak real quick as you bring it up.
Yeah.
Just on that act. So that act recently passed the Senate. It's called the Rubio-Scott Amendment. And basically, it's an amendment to provide internet access to Cubans. It just got passed in the Senate. It's going to the House of Representatives, so probably going to pass there. It'll be interesting to see how they plan on implementing this policy. But yeah, go ahead, Vic.
No, so this is important. This is the fact that they want to help the Cubans, that the imperialists and the Cuban Americans want to help the Cubans with internet access. Why are they making such a push for this? Is because they know that they can utilize this as a way to foment civil war, right? So here's the piece by Reuters, the Facebook group that staged first in Cuba's wave of protest. So let me just get to one part here. So the protests, Cuba's most widespread since Fidel Castro's 1959 revolution, appeared largely spontaneous as Cubans vented frustrations over long lines for food, power outages, medicine shortages, as well as curbs on civil freedoms, quote unquote, right? Yet an investigation by non-state Cuban outlet El Estortuno estornudo, perdóname,
Yeah.
cited by state television and confirmed by Reuters, recently showed that the first protest was convened online by a San Antonio community forum for local people and those who had emigrated. The Facebook group City of Humor, the nickname for San Antonio, which hosts a biannual humor festival, was created in 2017 as a social space, according to one of its 3 administrators, Miami-based Alexander Perez. All right. So this is significant. This is very significant. Obviously, the Cubans have already laid out their case and have made their case and have presented evidence to the world, essentially saying, look, we know where this stuff came from. We know where this stuff originated from. And of course, the United States government has not really replied to those accusations. But here's a Western media outlet for folks who care about that, stating, look, this is where this stuff has its origins. It's in Miami, right? So you couple that this report, the accusations made by the Cubans, with the fact that Joe Biden administration, along with these folks in Congress, are trying to push for this, let's help these Cubans out by bringing them internet access. There's obviously there's a reason for that. So this is just important for folks to understand this, and especially if you yourself are having debates with some folks to try to piece this stuff together. There's a reason why these things are happening. All right.
And 2, here's the next big debate that's going to come up. I can already see it. So what's Cuba going to do in response to this? Well, they're going to have to limit internet access to certain sites. And the whole big debate that's going to be now is, oh, well, Cuba's an authoritarian and oppressive government because it's limiting internet access. Your response, everyone's response should be simple. First of all, every country in the world limits internet access. The United States just shut down our access to press TV not too long ago. So every country in the world does that, first of all. Second of all, let's really think. What countries do we always hear as limiting access? Iran, Venezuela, China, North Korea. Why do you think they limit access to the internet? Because the United States is already doing this same policy in those fucking countries. That's literally the whole point. And we've seen what that does. That gets, hundreds of people killed in Venezuela, where they start funding cartels and opposition members, and they start misconstruing news and showing the opposition as being stronger than what it actually is. The same shit in Iran, same shit in China. It's the same shit in every country that has had to restrict its internet access. It's not that they want to do that. They're literally being forced to do that by the United States, who's trying to weaponize the internet. And so that's, don't anyone who tries to say, oh, this is oppressive, authoritarian, it's not. It's a defensive tactic against the offensive move from the imperialists.
And they have a right to do that.
Right.
They have a right to defend their sovereignty, period.
Right.
Lastly, on Cuba. So Cuban scientists, I'm going to actually bring this one up as well. By the way, for folks, I always have a hard time. We talk about media outlets that we do want to support. Here is one of them, and I always have a hard time pronouncing this stuff. The name. Maybe you could help me out here, Nick. Is it Casachun News?
I have the same issue.
All right. So yeah. So they do, and folks did mention them in the comments section, and we appreciate that. I think they do excellent. They do excellent work. Cuban scientists pen letter to Biden rejecting failed state claim. So I just want to point towards the end of the piece here. It's a good piece. Cuban scientists urge Biden to reject failed state claim in a pen letter. Here's just a few quotes from Dr. Lage Davila, a Cuban scientist signee to the letter. In 2009, Nature, which is a scientific journal, said that the Cuban biotechnology system was the best biotechnology system in the world in developing countries. The question we can ask ourselves at this point is whether a country with those results needs someone's intervention to introduce a vaccine against COVID-19. The fact that we say that we do not need an intervention in the sense that the U.S. government is presenting does not mean that we do not want cooperation. We do want cooperation. In fact, we have sought for decades and promoted cooperation with U.S. scientists. And a reliable example of this is the existing exchange and the development of the therapeutic vaccine against lung cancer. And so, I thought that was important to highlight the fact that Cuban scientists have organized themselves in Cuba to write a letter to Joe Biden. Are we naive to think that this letter is going to, change anything? No, we're not naive, but but these things are important to get it on record, right? So Cuban scientists did this. This is what they've done, and it's important to show solidarity and to highlight that to the rest of the world.
Right.
Give me just a second here. All right. Any thoughts on that before we move on?
No, I mean, it's kind of like what we were talking about this earlier. The using international bodies in order to make a statement, and the importance, even though, yesterday we were talking about this, even though things like the UN oftentimes fail to materialize support or are problematic in some of their support, it's important that, there's still institutions which it can be used to keep track of, to note certain oppressions, genocides, are serious issues that go on internationally. In Cuba, the Cuban government, Cuban reporters, they're known to do this, right? They do this all the time. They appeal to the United Nations. Malcolm X appealed to the United Nations. Puerto Ricans appeal to the United Nations. And it's important to do that. We're not expecting them to come save us, but we are expecting them to at least listen to us and keep the record of that. Right.
You and I had a conversation about this yesterday, and Orinoco Tribune, and I hope I pronounced Orinoco correctly. So you're saying, okay, so it is pronounced Causachun. I hope I got that correctly. Causachun. You guys are going to have to help me out over there, Orinoco. So, and this is, that's a let me just reflect a little bit. That's a critique I have of myself. Like, I don't, indigenous names, I struggle with those things. I've never studied indigenous languages and that exist in Latin America, and I know there's several, and so I do struggle with that. Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. I appreciate it. All right. So Orinoco Tribune just responded. So definitely help me out with those things, and definitely just as a criticism, a critique on myself. One of the things that I know that, and I'm sort of going off the mark here a little bit, but I need to do a better job at understanding indigenous movements, understanding the indigenous movements that exist, the history in Latin America, and also my parents are from the Dominican Republic, as folks should know already. Right? I'm Dominican American. I struggle with, I often ignore, and this isn't intentional. I often ignore the other Caribbean islands that are not the Spanish speaking islands. And that's, I should not be doing that. That's not something that's, in fact, again, there's a long history there of Caribbean folks being in solidarity with one another, regardless of language and culture. Right. And so that's just a critique that I have on myself. Okay, so folks are helping me out here. I appreciate that, but that's something that I know I'm consciously working towards getting better at. Let's continue here. Let's go to now Mexico. This is interesting. I mean, this is interesting. AMLO, again, he's an interesting dude. The president of Mexico is an interesting dude. I personally, I'm not speaking for the rest of Anticonquista. I personally do support AMLO. And I think that he's a step, let's just say he's a step in the right direction. That's not to say that I don't have my critiques, but I'm reserved about those critiques, right? Because again, these are internal questions for the Mexicans to decide. But nonetheless, Mexico is working with the U.S. on the issue of immigration in exchange for a lifting of restrictions on non-essential travel. Mexico has flown thousands of undocumented migrants from northern cities to its southern borders. And this is the question of immigration continues to come up as it relates to the United States with Mexico. And I know AMLO is receiving a lot of critiques from a lot of different places, from a lot of different ideological spaces. I don't know if you had anything to add to. I'm not going to say anything else about that. But anything to add to that, Nick?
Yeah. So I'll say this: when Trump was in office, people, and again, so first I want to say I agree with you. I have my criticism of AMLO, but I do support him, right? And I think the reason why I support him is because I had this professor who who was teaching about history of Mexico, and he put AMLO's victory, and this was right around AMLO was elected. He put it in very clear terms. He said, look, the reason why AMLO is so popular is because he's different from the right-wing narco dictators and narco leaders who were president of Mexico, so many years before. He has that kind of aura, and he brings this a notion of peace and stability. People want peace and stability after you have years and years and years of just, tens of thousands of people being murdered due to homicide and violence, drug violence, criminal violence, corruption, all these, very serious issues that take place in which have kind of created this stereotypical view of Mexico, right? And he brought this kind of feeling of tranquility, peace, calm, stability, and people like that, and that's why he's popular. But I remember maybe last year or 2 years ago, he did this deal with Trump at something like where Trump told him, look, you got to stop, you got to limit how many immigrants are coming across the border. And he ended up saying, AMLO kind of caved in and said, yeah, I'll do that. And people's excuse for that was, well, Trump is in office. Who knows what kind of sanctions or what kind of things they could do to the Mexican government. Now Biden is in office, and they're still working. The Mexican government AMLO is still working with the U.S. in order to halt immigration. So that's interesting to me. The other thing I would say is, look, it's oftentimes immigration is a serious issue. It's my opinion, one of the most serious issues for imperialist nations. It's not just the U.S. The immigration is an economic issue, and it's a political issue. It's an issue of labor. The U.S. does not want a surplus of immigrant labor. That's why they have deportations. Working with Mexico or any other nation in the southern border allows the United States to avoid deportations by simply getting Mexico to deal with the immigration problem before it ever hits the United States, right? And it's a way to control the flow of labor by working with global South countries. So that's what this whole thing is about, right? This is the reason why the U.S. and Mexico are even working together in the first place. And it's, in my opinion, it's not a good policy. It's not a good policy because it's kind of it's dehumanizing to the migrants. It's limiting. They're looking to get a better life for themselves. Staying in Mexico, let's be honest, the resources and the capacity for the Mexican government to care for the amount of immigrants and migrants who are coming into Mexico now is not nearly the same as the capacity that the United States has. And we know this because of the differences in wealth, right? The U.S. has the capacity to actually care for a lot of these migrants, but they're choosing not to. They're willingly and intentionally choosing not to, and putting the burden on our homelands, on our countries, the same countries that they've destroyed.
Right on. And I just want to respond to someone here who's just thanking us, and we thank you as well. Right. But right on, Nick. Great analysis on that. And I apologize that I'm in the mode of let's go to the next headline, because we're hitting 2 hours and 3 minutes. A lot of folks are still with us, and again, we appreciate all of you folks. So Nick, you covered this yourself a few times. Alejandro Celorio Alcantara, legal advisor of Mexico's foreign affairs, wrote an op-ed to the Washington Post titled, Mexico's tired of U.S. guns blooding our streets. That's why we are suing manufacturers. I encourage folks to read it. It is very carefully written. He's an attorney, so it was written in such a way that was very careful about being using both diplomacy but trying to score some political points with the North American audience. So but I thought it was a good piece. I'm not sure if you had any other thoughts on that. I know you've covered this a few times now.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an important lawsuit by the Mexican government, because it gets at the root of the gun trafficking issue, which is U.S. corporations who are doing black market deals and profiting off of the deaths of thousands of, not just Mexicans, but, Guatemalans, Nicaraguans, Hondurans, every one of our peoples who has to suffer from cartel and criminal violence. Most of that is, U.S. weapons.
Right on. Absolutely. Absolutely. So next headline here about we're sticking with Mexico. And this is, again, it's like you got the good AMLO, you got the bad AMLO. So here's the good AMLO. AMLO states the Spanish monarchy and Roman Catholic Church should formally apologize for what they did to the indigenous and for essentially colonizing their region. AMLO said the following: the conquest and colonization are signs of backwardness, not of civilization, less of justice. And so you get some people are going to say, well, these are just words, but again, it's important to say this on record, right? It's very important to say this on record. Not sure if you had any thoughts on that before I move on to the next one. Okay.
Yeah, Spain's taking some hits this week, man.
Yeah, absolutely, as they should. AMLO creates the Army Command Office functioning under the Defense Department. The purpose of the office is to singularly focus on military matters, and the reason for this is because AMLO has had has given many assignments to the Army, a series of roles, different series of roles since taking office, everything from building airports to transporting COVID-19 vaccines to law enforcement to building bank branch offices. So I thought that was interesting. Let's see here. Last piece on Mexico. AMLO offers protection to Mexican journalists. And somebody mentioned this, and I hope I'm pronouncing this name correctly. Azucena Uresti, powerful drug cartels are threatening to kill her. So apparently they've created a system there to try to protect this Mexican journalist. And I did see someone mention this particular. And for folks that don't know, excuse me. Mexico is one of the worst places to be a journalist. I mean, if you're choosing, that profession in that that particular country, I mean, it's God, if there's a God, God bless you, because it's just that I believe they have it's either the most or one of the top 5 most dangerous professions, or one of the top 5 countries, or the most dangerous country to be a journalist. So it's just it's just a crazy situation there in Mexico. I'm not sure if you had anything else to add.
No.
Okay. So let's see here. So someone mentioned in the threads here in the comments, Saint Lucia, Caribbean island, is leaving the Lima group. It has also decided to reestablish relations with Venezuela. Prime Minister Philip Pierre is a member of the Saint Lucia Labor Party. And President Nicolas Maduro immediately congratulated Prime Minister Pierre on his recent election victory. So that's another group, a country leaving the Lima group, saying, fuck this, we don't need to be a part of this.
Right. And I think that's important. That just shows the power of this new kind of left-wing wave that's sweeping over Latin America, right? More and more folks are leaning into that Venezuela, Nicaragua, Cuba alliance, and ditching U.S. imperialism, and that's powerful. And Saint Lucia too that's a Black Caribbean island, right? A lot of these islands in the Caribbean are Black, right? They are descendants of African blood, sometimes mixed with also indigenous blood, right? And so we're getting really like This is the Black and Brown alliance that's being formed in Latin America right now to combat imperialism. This is
100%. 100%. Absolutely. Absolutely. And as I've said multiple times, I'm going to continue to repeat it. There's a revolution happening in Latin America and the Caribbean, and there's really nothing that anybody can do to stop it. People are fighting. People have fought for socialism now for decades. And that's not stopping. Many people have lost their lives all over the region. And we all have our different stories. You speak to the people from different parts of Latin America and the Caribbean, and you hear all types of stories about young revolutionaries dying in the streets by oppressive regimes. But anyways, continuing on here to Venezuela. There's some interesting information coming out of Venezuela here. President Nicolas Maduro has signed they're calling this a memorandum of understanding with opposition leaders. Both sides have agreed to discuss a schedule for elections, lifting of sanctions, and the restoration of the right to use Venezuelan frozen assets. I'm going to pull, give me just a second here because
I think we've talked about while you pull it up, I'll speak real quick.
Yeah.
I think we've talked about this a little bit too, but the opposition in Venezuela has been so thoroughly embarrassed by the Chavistas that they literally split. So while Guaido is still trying to support sanctions and U.S. intervention, the rest of the opposition has abandoned him and has joined, even though they're still against the Bolivarian Revolution and the Chavistas, they're trying to cooperate and collaborate now with the Chavistas, because that's the only way that they can continue to exist in Venezuela.
Right on. And we've referenced, so we're now using, again, I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, Causachum News again. And I thought they did an excellent job here of summing up the agenda points. And I know it's very difficult to see it there, but I definitely recommend folks check them out. So let me just, I'll keep it on the headline here as I read this. Here are the key points. And some of this stuff, it's kind of like, like the first one, political rights for all. I don't know what that means, but it's there, right? So political rights for all. 2, electoral guarantees for all, an electoral schedule for observable elections. 3, lifting of sanctions and restoration of right to assets. 4, respect for the constitutional state of law. 5, political and social coexistence, renunciation of violence and reparation to the victims. 6, protection of the national economy and protection measures for the Venezuelan people. 7, guarantees of implementation, monitoring, and verification of the agreements. And so those are the key points. I've tried to look in other, Western media outlets and other places, and I think they did the best job of summing up what the and I haven't seen, if anybody has a copy of it, please send it to us, of what they actually signed. But that's the memorandum of understanding, as they're calling it. And these talks, by the way, this is happening in Mexico. So again, another good thing, right? For as far as our perception of AMLO and how AMLO is being perceived. That's another good deed by the government of Mexico to allow these talks to take place. I'm very, I'm supportive of whatever the Chavistas are doing. Number 2, we can't be naive and not understand the different players that are involved, right? So the Venezuelan opposition, what do they want? They want to get back into power. And who are the people who are facilitating these talks? It's a lot of Western powers, right? So you look around the room and you're like, okay, what the fuck is the deal here, right? So we have to be very clear about some of this stuff. And so I get it, I get it, because the Chavistas are stuck between a rock and a hard, like they're trying to build revolution at the same time there's a war being waged against them, right? To obstruct them at every single turn, to do whatever they can to try to undermine the Chavista government. And so, it's just a very difficult situation here. I'll add one more thing before hearing your response. A name that people should become familiar with, and for folks who've been following this for years, you already know the name. Enrique Capriles is urging the opposition to participate in elections for governors and mayors in November. Okay, so again, to kind of set this up for the audience, it appears as though that the opposition is now taking a different route, a different approach. They are very marginal. They don't have a lot of power, but these things can quickly turn on you, right? And so that whole liberal democracy, election stuff could be a kind of a tricky situation, right? And so I expect the Chavistas to win in another election, if and be able to compete and maintain power. But I don't put anything past the opposition in terms of trying to get back into power. So I'll stop there and hear your thoughts.
Nah, I mean, I agree. It is like we said earlier. It's all about power. It's all about power, and I think it's tough for the Chavistas. It's tough for Maduro because look, any minor slip up, and the U.S. media, imperialist media, will go after you using the same talking points we've heard all the time. Any kind of mistake, anything, the U.S. will use anything that they can get their hands on to really demonize Maduro. And let's be honest, right now, Venezuela is under a microscope, I would say more so than some other nations in Latin America. If Maduro, and one of the things that I think we would agree with, well, Guaido should be arrested, right? But if Maduro starts doing stuff like that, what's the first thing that's going to be coming out of U.S. media? Well, he's authoritarian, he's a dictator, this and that, right? So for President Maduro, what needs to happen is he needs to find this middle ground, this balance, right? And in order to kind of play not into the hands of the U.S., but play off the U.S. while also maintaining that kind of dedication to the people of Venezuela. And so, I think you're absolutely right. They're stuck between a rock and a hard place, and it's tough. But this is probably the best solution right now for dealing with the political violence, because a lot of that violence is being waged by the Venezuelan opposition. And I think, given what we've seen when they did run in elections, they got their asses kicked, right? The Chavistas swept, and that's bound to happen again because the legacy of what the Venezuelan opposition did, in my opinion, they've demonized and bastardized themselves, right? They've already made themselves look like fools. The support that they did have is probably waning. So I imagine it'll work out in the Chavistas' favor. But it's going to be, it is something to watch and be careful of, because the other thing too is look at, again, going back to Bolivia, the Bolivian opposition was a joke. Like the right-wing opposition in Bolivia was a joke. It was far weaker than what we saw in Venezuela. And yet they were still able to take power, even if it was temporarily. They were still able to temporarily take power. So it's stuff like that they got to be very cautious of and aware of. And I'm sure, look, we're telling this to an audience, but the Venezuelan government doesn't need to hear this from us. Like, they already know this shit, right? They're already aware of this shit. So this is just mostly for people to be aware of.
Right on. Right on. Dead on. Absolutely. But it's I am 100% interested to see how all of this stuff develops. And again, my main concern is the Chavistas losing power, and that's and I don't think that that's going to be the case at all. But I just they have not liquidated the bourgeoisie, the capitalist class over there. That hasn't happened. All right. So the Chavistas are firmly in power. But these things are fluid, right? And so that's my main concern is always with Venezuela, that the Chavistas lose power. One last thing on Venezuela, I found a piece there along with a video at CGTN, which is a China news, a China state-run outlet, and they talked about food insecurity and malnutrition growing in Venezuela. And again, you know, for folks who for folks who are on the right, or folks who just don't understand this, they're going to point to socialism and say this is the problem with socialism, without providing any context. And that's you know, that's sloppy, that's ignorant in the true sense of the word. You know, so you know, the situation in Venezuela is dire, and it has nothing to do with socialism. That's just bullshit, you know. And so we've talked about Venezuela a bunch of times here on Anticonquista, Orinoco Tribune. We're not planning to commit suicide, Victor, but yes, we have to stay awake and on guard. Absolutely, 100%. All right. So, any thoughts on that, Nick?
No, I mean, it's sanctions, right? It's the genocide, and sanctions are, as the Cubans have shown, are genocidal, right? It's genocide. It's
that and a bunch of other things that have happened since the Chavistas have taken power. I mean, it's just that's one of them. All right. So moving to Brazil. So, Nick, you sent me this, and I thought this was fascinating. I thought this was I'm actually going to bring this up. So this is from Brazil Wire. The headline reads, Steve Bannon declares war on Lula. And I'm going to pull it up, and I'm going to read some of it. And for folks, again, we have our critiques for sure of Lula, without question. We've raised many concerns here before in the past here, Anticonquista of Lula, specifically with as it relates to Haiti. But Lula is also the same guy, again, give me just a second here. I'm always interested to see what Orinoco Tribune has to say. So they're in our comment section. Maduro is entering this negotiation from a solid position. Many of us Chavistas wish to see sanctions and the blockade lifted, and that's hopefully the big picture here for that time. That's their big gain right now. So yeah, 100%. We should get Orinoco Tribune on here so at some point so we can have a conversation. But going back to Steve Bannon. So Steve Bannon declares war on Lula. Now, you know, I don't think Steve Bannon needs any introduction. This guy's a white nationalist, a white supremacist. And remember that Lula gave a speech for, you know, if you don't know, Lula gave a speech at the UN where he pretty much attacked white supremacy and talked about, you know, European colonialism and whatnot. I don't think Steve Bannon has forgotten that, clearly. So here's how the piece starts off. Far right guru Steve Bannon has been using his political weight to support Jair Bolsonaro's electoral campaign. Eduardo Bolsonaro, Jair's congressman's son, met Bannon last Tuesday at a conference organized by Mike Lindell, Trump-supporting businessman and one of those responsible for spreading conspiracy theories about the victory of Joe Biden in the United States in 2020. Eduardo was invited to take the stage and was introduced by Bannon as the third son of Trump from the tropics. The congressman repeated this information about Brazil's electronic voting machines and presented videos of his father on motorcycle convoys with his supporters. In an opening speech, international far-right ringleader Bannon attacked former President Lula and claimed that Brazil's 2020 presidential election is the most important of all time in South America. So Bannon is not stupid. He understands the significance of the Brazilian economy, geopolitically where it's situated. It's a huge country, right? So he's not stupid. But this is interesting, right? And people have called Bolsonaro, you know, baby Trump and stuff like that. This whole thing right here is fascinating. There's a lot that's happening there in Brazil, and everything is pointing towards Bolsonaro trying to undermine the electoral system there. And again, let's be clear that this is a question of power, right? So what is he doing? It's the same. It's not much different than what we would probably advocate for, except that again this is coming from a different perspective, right? So Bolsonaro is again everything is pointing towards him trying to undermine that system and possibly having even orchestrating a coup. So I'll stop there and wait for your response.
Right. I mean, real quick on power, the tactics are the same, but the ideology is different, and that's what we care about. That's what's important to us. And you know, people who try to like, because I imagine, you know, there are a lot of anarchists who try to say, well, power in general is bad, state power is bad, but that's bullshit, because it's not about the power or the tactics. It's about the ideologies. What do these people believe in? Bolsonaro's not fighting for the people. He's fighting for the elite few. Lula is, right? Or Castillo is, or President Ortega is, right? So that's the difference. But this is, if you could go, so could you go down on the article to the next paragraph, the one right after you, the one that starts, Bannon said about 30 days. So look at this quote from Bannon. In this quote, one of the things I think he says is that Lula is the most important. What is it? Lula
is the most dangerous leftist in the world. Will face the most dangerous leftist in the world, Lula, a criminal and communist supported by all the media here in the U.S., all the left-wing media. This election is the second most important in the world and the most important of all time in South America. Bolsonaro will win unless it is stolen by, guess what? The machines.
Right. And I think that's one of the best quotes that Bannon has in this whole piece. So they admit that they see Lula as the most dangerous leftist, as the most dangerous person in the world. Our analysis, our question has to be, well, why? Why didn't they say that about Pedro Castillo? Why not AMLO? Why not President Ortega? Why not anyone else, right? I would say the reason is because, look, you got to understand the position of Brazil and Mexico and Latin America. These are two of the largest countries in Latin America. Biggest populations, biggest economies. They have a lot of weight in the region. If AMLO is already president in Mexico, so it's already a progressive, government. But Brazil is one of the biggest allies to the U.S. and to U.S. imperialism in Latin America. When U.S. was going after Venezuela, they were organizing in two places, in Colombia and in Brazil, right? So these were the two areas that were being used as a U.S. base to launch these attacks. If Brazil falls to a progressive, a socialist, any kind of left-wing government, the U.S. is going to lose one of its biggest allies in the region. And it will have lost Brazil and Mexico, and only Colombia is really like the one of the larger nations with a lot of weight that is allied to the U.S. So this is why Steve Bannon is out here saying this is the most important election behind the U.S. election. This is so important. He's so dangerous. This is why he's out here doing this, because for the U.S. imperialist interest in Latin America, Brazil is key. It always has been key. And right now it's even more important as the left is like sweeping all across the continent. So this is, this stood out to me because in my eyes, this is where U.S. foreign policy is going. All eyes are going to, after Nicaragua, all eyes are going to be turned to Brazil.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And I don't have much more to add to that other than just to say that, these are things that we're going to continue to cover here at Anticonquista. It's important for you folks at home to understand this stuff. This is all, from our perspective, this is an exciting time. And I say that in both a very romantic and idealistic way, and also from a very materialist perspective, because if this thing just keeps marching on, and I believe it will, things are going to change in Latin America, right? Material conditions are going to change, and the relationship between Latin America and the Caribbean and the United States will change. All right. I make the argument that, what happened in Cuba is just another embarrassment for the United States, because the Cubans won again. They won right before July 11th with the UN vote being 180 something to 2, where the United States couldn't get one other fucking country to vote in its favor, right? And I'm talking about the UN vote against with the issue of the blockade, and then what happened immediately after July 11th. The Cuban communist leadership took control of the streets. They restored peace and order back to Cuba. And then what happened? We got a nice, healthy distraction of the Olympics, where the Cubans fucking kicked ass once again and showed the world. And then not only that, but proud Cubans one of the Cubans, after his bout, he said, "Patria y vida no, patria o muerte sí." And then you had another Cuban at the end. I'm blanking on his name, but he's now a 4-time wrestling champion, right? 4-time gold medalist, and he dedicated his gold medal to Fidel Castro. It's just United States just they just keep catching L's now. Like it's just it's one L after another, and it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing to the United States, and they can't stop it. There's nothing they can do to stop it. But yeah, we got to stay vigilant. We got to keep paying attention to what's happening and be in solidarity with these movements in Latin America and the Caribbean. So I think we're going to end there, unless you wanted to bring up anything else. I did skip over some top stuff, but for the sake of time, we're going now 2 hours and 30 minutes, and I think we're gonna end there. Did you want to have any closing statements, Nick, about anything that we discussed today?
No, I mean, no, I think it was a pretty good discussion today. I think the first half touched on important points, important criticisms. I think y'all put it really well. Like, it's not even really about us attacking anyone or trying to tell people not to do something or not to watch something. It's more so just kind of a observation, a critical observation on where things are right now, which is that our people need to make more space for themselves, right? And that's important to do. And we need to not only make more space for ourselves, but also lead ourselves, right? And, for the news segments, it's there's not much more to add than what we already said. There's a lot going on in other parts of the world right now. The main news that most people are talking about is the Taliban taking over Afghanistan, which is kind of a big thing. My only thing about that story is, it doesn't really relate to Latin America, so I'll keep it brief. But my only thing about that is notice how many mainstream news outlets were talking. It'll take the Taliban 6 months, 8 months to take control over Afghanistan. They did that shit in a week. And I think that's important because it gets back to what we've been talking about, which is there's two different worlds. There's the world that the U.S. media tries to say that we live in. And then there's a world that actual material reality shows that we live in, right? The U.S. media will have us think that Cuban counter-revolutionary reactionaries make up the majority of the Cuban population. You go to Cuba and you find out the majority of the population loves Fidel and supports their country. Same with Nicaragua. Same with Venezuela, right? We can't get confused and lost in this propaganda because look at what happened with Cuba too. A lot of leftists, people who call themselves left, people who call themselves anti-imperialist, people who call themselves, progressive, whatever. A lot of them fell for the BS on Cuba, whether it be around gender or race or, even like class, like in the class oppression. A lot of that bullshit was bullshit. And people fell for it because of the power of the U.S. media, the power to create two different worlds. And we got to be aware of that. And this is why we do these programs, so that we can fight against that.
Absolutely. So let's end there. As always, we thank you, the audience. We thank you for your support. Please share, please like, please subscribe. Please check us out on all social media platforms. Please check out our website, anticonquista.com. Again, we can't really do any of this work without any of you. And Nick and I, on our ride back home from watching the takeover documentary on the Young Lords, we were discussing how, I personally was a little dismissive of this technology in terms of a way to bring about change, if you will. But you can't deny this the power of this technology. When you got President Miguel Diaz-Canel talking about winning the battle of ideas over social in the social media spaces, that's significant. That is significant. And then Nick, you brought up a good point. You said, look, the Black Panthers and the Young Lords were doing propaganda back then. We're doing it now. It's just a different way of doing it. We just have technology now that does it for us. And that was an excellent point. So So we definitely have to win this battle of ideas in this space, and continue to influence and win people over and bring them over to our side, specifically with young people who who don't necessarily, in the West, don't necessarily maybe have an ideology, because they're going to go one of two ways, right? They're either going to become imperialists, or they could become something else. They could become revolutionaries, and it's our job to try to win them over and have them come over on our side. We thank you folks. So someone's asking about the Young Lords documentary. It's going to be out in October. We will be bringing on, I could say this with a high degree of confidence, we will be bringing on the director of the film, and Carlito Rovira, former Young Lord, will also be with us when we do that interview. When it comes out, everyone needs to watch it. It's that good. It's just really, really that good, and it's not going to take up too much of your time. But it definitely helps in terms of inspiring, in terms of developing our imagination, in terms of what could be. And Carlito Rovira has and I think it's now on Facebook. I think he put it up on Facebook. He said something that was interesting. He says something along the lines of like, look, the ruling class can be defeated. We could organize ourselves and do this. We could create revolution. It's possible. It is possible. It's been done before,
Right.
So this idea, that, and Fidel Castro would often say, don't, you can't call yourself a revolutionary if you're not going to be optimistic. If you're going to have a pessimistic, very cynical view of the world, it's just, you can't call yourself a revolutionary. Again, it's like not enough to understand and interpret the world. It's our job to change it, right? And so we could do this. We could. We're not there right now, but we could be there, and it could happen very quickly. So we'll end the program there. Again, we appreciate the audience. This is episode 8 of Nuestra America, Our America Weekly News Roundup. Orinoco Tribune, jumped in a little bit there. I don't know if they're still here, but we appreciate you guys. Solidarity with you folks, and solidarity definitely with all the folks who check in every single week. Again, we appreciate y'all. Peace, salute, and we'll catch y'all next week.
Peace.